power. For the sake of absolute power, people ready to do anything and see no boundaries. They start wars, plotting intrigues, betray their comrades, but often the price of this race becomes too high. In Japan, mired in infighting and fear, only you, the warrior with a mysterious past and exceptional abilities, can restore the balance. Although this will be very difficult in all senses. Today we will dive deep into game design of Nioh 2. I only got to it now with the PC release, and I want to analyze the design of this remarkable project. We will consider elements and features that have become an innovative for the series and designed to improve the gaming experience of the original Nioh. Let's see what the Team Ninja has prepared for us this time. So come to the shrine and prepare your jutsu. We are breaking in. The first Nioh wasn't bad at all. There was an outstanding combat encounters, a generous loot system, exciting boss fights, stunning character animations, spectacular cutscenes, and a huge number of smaller remarkable features. Although it had many weak design elements as well. Unmemorable patterned level design, lack of variability in enemy roster, inconsistent art direction, poor storyline, monotonous grind, and problems with the overall gameplay pacing. So let's see if they managed to fix and improve these elements in sequel. We will start with the new gameplay mechanics. One of the really fascinating systems in Nioh 2 is the Yokai Shapeshifting. Depending on the type of the spirit guardian you choose, your character will transform into brute, feral or phantom demon. Each of these forms has its own moveset, ultimate ability and burst counter. Brute is a tough melee fighter with sweeping, strong but slow attacks. Feral is quick and agile with multiple fast attacks, and finally the Phantom, that is focused on the range damage dealing. The choice of a specific type of spirit dramatically affects core gameplay, due to the new burst counter mechanic that got different timings, hitboxes and positioning schemes. The Brute burst counter is used to interrupt the attacks on initial phase, and must be applied before the enemy strike. The Feral counter instantly dashes our character and must be timed exactly into the landed strike to parry one, while the Phantom raises weapon in defensive stance to block an opponent's strike. Simply put, this is a counter, parry and shield block respectively. The design goal of this shifting system to grant the player strength and invincibility feeling, at least temporarily. And burst counter specifically is much deeper. It is made for constant reactive interaction with enemies, because in addition to ability to interrupt the most powerful attacks, these counters can deal huge damage to the keybar. Mastering this technique becomes a critical gameplay task, and this is not easy at all, because every opponent from trash mobs to bosses got several burst attacks in their arsenal, with completely different animations, timings, hitboxes and movement trajectories. This simple feature improved combat system of the sequel. Developers managed to add a new level of experience to already complex, deep and exciting combat system. And if we look at this feature through the prism of player emotions, then these burst attacks and counters raises player tension level exponentially in the preparation phase, and provide an instant victory feeling when the counter is successfully executed. This is an ideal spice for the combat system, which is, by the way, has other design changes to consider. Here we got new weapons like a split staff, hatchets, fist weapons and my personal favorite, switchglaives. All of this got unique movesets, features and own skill trees. Already existing weapon categories have also been reworked. For example, I noticed a significant improvement in the hitboxes of katanas and kusurigamas, although spears in my humble opinion are still useless. Also, in addition to physical and elemental damage of weapons, the corruption and purification mechanics were added. When the weapon reaches the awakened state, you get a strong buff to its damage, and in the case of corruption, you can hear the thoughts of yokai spirit imprisoned in your weapon. I personally adore this small detail. And even if we look at the most basic mechanics, we can notice small, almost imperceptible but very critical changes. For instance, Key Pulse, a mechanic that restores part of the stamina spent by pressing right button in the exact timing range, while there is the most optimal ending moment that restores maximum stamina. And if you manage to use Key Pulse at this perfect timing, you destroy the Dark Realm puddles spawned by yokai enemies in the original game. But the actual gameplay looked like this. You performing combo, then waiting for the right moment for Key Pulse activation, and at this moment you get smashed because enemy already begins his own deadly attack and you get forced to start over from the shrine. Thus, getting rid of puddles during the battle was extremely problematic, but you need to do it anyway since standing in these puddles drains your ki and reduces its restore rate greatly. As a result, you were constantly infuriated by this mechanic and all your attention was focused on stamina to activate ki pulls when a rare opportunity would appear. This greatly spoiled the gameplay. In Nioh 2, developers led the player to get rid of puddles using ki pulls at any possible time, even almost immediately after the combo. They solved several gameplay problems with one small setting, and saved players from frustration. Yes, of course, it is not always possible to solve such fundamental gameplay problems with a small effort spent, but I think this is a good example anyway. And there are really a lot of such improvements in combat system of the sequel, so if you noticed another remarkable ones, let's discuss these in comments. Beyond all that, a real decoration of Nioh 2 combat system is Yokai Soul Core abilities. These drops rarely and gives you an exceptional combat move. Apart from the efficiency, this rather decorate the gameplay. Plus, this feature works great in terms of collecting trophies, often even much better than the loot system itself, which we will discuss a bit later. And if you go into more detail, this Soul Core system also adds variability and depth to the gameplay, which greatly affects replayability of the project. And we didn't even talk here about dozens of smaller systems and features that support the combat encounters. For example, the confusion debuff, when you need to apply on your enemy two different elemental effects simultaneously. It does a bunch of useful stuff, but mainly it temporarily suppresses the boss' ability to call the Dark Realm. At this point, they take a huge amount of damage, so all speedrunners' strats are based on this effect. I think you see what I'm getting at. At first glance, there are not so many changes in the core gameplay of Nioh 2. But in fact, all these small improvements have raised the combat system to a completely new level. And this is a great example of evolutionary game design. It seems to me that this approach should be applied to all elements that already works perfectly. But unfortunately, not all elements of the game have gone through such major changes and improvements. This cannot be said about the level design. This element was frankly the weakest part of the original game, mostly because of its patterned, flat and unremarkable levels, like peasant villages with randomly arranged identical huts or featureless, countless caves with no navigation possibilities. And this is a problem of both games. Despite of the minimap, the value of which is questionable, player simply doesn't have convenient navigation tools. No landmarks, no assistance, nothing. And second problem, make it even worse. It is the limited space. Most of the locations are either narrow streets or claustrophobic caves, with some rooms along the way. Open spaces, or at least their simulation, can solve all these problems. Besides, these issues are compounded by the level building patterns. Just after a couple of hours, player easily reads these patterns. At the start of the level there's always a shrine, next to which is a door that opens from the other side. In the following level section there are a few shortcuts, neighboring with a Kadama or chest hidden between destructible boxes. And then we reach that closed door near first shrine. Now we're taking all of this and copy-paste it 2 or 3 times, depending on how much we want to get level overstretched. At the end we add boss arena, and in the middle you can think about the mini-boss event. That's pretty much it. And the problem is that as soon as the level design becomes predictable, player lose interest in the exploration. Only the visual scenery changes. It should not work that way. I know it's tried, but take Dark Souls. Almost all locations have open spaces and clear landmarks. Level layout is unpredictable. Player doesn't know what awaits him next, and there is one of the main objectives of level design, to set new gameplay challenges, surprise and awaken the desire to explore this world. Okay, it sounds like Nioh hate, but it's not like that. I think there is a huge potential that can be unlocked. For example, locations of the Snake Temple, Golden Palace or Dragon Shrines missions are really good. You just need to make more of these. Not content, but levels with unique design. Now let's move to aesthetic part. Art direction has taken a step forward in comparison with the original, mostly due to revision of color palette. It is more bright and showy. Other elements also get proper improvements. Now art direction become consistent. All visual elements, models, game objects and textures harmoniously combine each other. Sound effects and music also perfectly complement this picture. Especially spectacular are cutscenes based on the game engine. Developers decided to add a lot of comedy this time, and they succeeded in many episodes. Some excerpts were even dragged into memes, and this is worth a lot. However, if you look closely at the main storyline, it is very trivial. Apparently, the expectation was that when player meets the legendary swordmaster Tsukahara Bakuden, Chief Commander Maeda Toshiie, or a deadly ninja Hattori Hanzo, he will be overwhelmed with memories and emotions recalled from old Japanese legends. But no, it doesn't work that way. First, most people may not know or not interested in these characters in particular. And secondly, this approach is more like using famous names as advertising billboards. You need to work on the characters thoroughly. Well, in any case, it is time for us to move on to the interface design. Here Team Ninja was able to optimize the weapons, magic and ninjutsu skill trees interaction, and it really works good. Other elements of interface has been minorly improved, but inventory interaction is the same chaos, and this rather fault of a loot system, so let's look at it closely. There are three fundamental problems with loot system. First is the lack of really unique items. By unique, I mean any of following characteristics. The item that either strengthens the particular combat ability to affect the game balance, or changes this ability or the outcome of its usage, or even adds completely new ability or game mechanic. Any of this defines the unique loot system. Not the color of item name, not the model, and not the texture. Any item in Nioh series only slightly enhance one of the dozens of possible effects, while the gameplay doesn't change a bit with equipping better gear. And this contradicts to the main objective of unique loot system, to use and reveal game mechanics on a different gameplay angle. Second problem is how the item stats affects overall strength of our character. It is almost completely cosmetic improvements. Player will never feel an improvement of 1 or 2% of damage or defense, so he stops to decide thoroughly for the most optimal items. This fact leads to a much more serious issue, the loss of interest to collecting items, and it is exactly opposite to players' wishes that should satisfy this kind of loot system. And third problem is the amount of loot dropped. Whole inventory is constantly littered with the weapons and armor sets. At some point, players simply getting lost in it. It is clear that you can sell or make offers to Kodamas, but in order for the loot to be valued more, you need to reduce its number and make the obtaining of unique and desirable items as dedicated challenge. For example, optional mini-boss or hidden level section, but there are no such thing. Well, finally, I want to talk about one of the great, if not the best part of Nioh 2, about combat encounters. Both ordinary enemies and bosses are implemented here at the top tier level. This is really the element for that a lot of players forgive other weaknesses. Let's start with the trash mobs. First, the general issue of the original Nioh is solved here. The variety of enemies, their abilities and appearance. Here you really face against huge armies of vastly different terrifying creatures. All of them have superb detailed models and carefully crafted animations. Their combat movesets and unique burst attacks creating fascinating combat puzzles. And if you face bunch at once, they can become a daunting problem. It is clear that some assets are borrowed from the first Nioh, but there are much more of new ones according to my notes, especially if you take the DLC ones. And every boss encounter is just a pure diamond. You will have to master moves, learn how to use burst counters, find weaknesses of certain elements or weapon types, and even in this case, battles promise to be as intense and difficult as possible. Even if boss can kill you in just 2 hits, you may say it's not quite honest, right? Well, maybe, but this feeling of delight from overcoming such challenges cannot be replaced by anything. Sometimes these attempts are very similar to masochism, but in the end, all the efforts are worth it. In general, Nioh 2, despite all its major and minor issues, is a fantastic game in terms of experience and great example of bold game design, which was really interesting to consider. Thank you for being with me all this journey. I'm sure that I missed something, so I invite you to the comment section. And if you like this video, you know what to do. I see you soon. Bye.